Guess what, guys? It is time for the return of Birding in Florida, the sequel that nobody asked for, but you're getting anyways. Yeah, this was another really great trip. I got to see a lot of cool birds. I was in the same region of Florida that I was in last time, so I did see a lot of repeat birds, but I did get to see some new stuff, and I got some new footage of some of the birds I saw last time. That I'd love to showcase to you guys, which is why I threw this video together. So I hope that you enjoy this overview of the birds that I saw, and I'll throw in a couple ID tips for some of the birds that I saw in the region. And yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. So on January 1st, which is when I was there, I decided to go on a walk through St. Pete Beach. And while I was walking through the town, I saw lots of birds throughout, such as these common grackle, which are hanging out on this fancy little power line wires, you know? I also saw 2, maybe 3 loggerhead shrikes, which was kind of crazy. I wasn't fully expecting to just see them in the town hanging out, but it's always awesome to see them. Shrikes are really cool predatory songbirds. They have this, what's called a tomial tooth on their bill. So they have the hook at the end of the bill, and they have like a little knob that's almost like another tooth-like projection right behind the hook. And that's used for when they grab onto vertebrate prey. It's actually used to sever their spine from their skull to paralyze them, which is pretty crazy. Falcons have the same thing and do the same behavior, which is, yeah, just like wild. And shrikes, they can take down like massive prey too. They can take down things that are like as big, if not bigger than them, which is like really impressive. They're just awesome songbirds. I love getting to see them. Don't get to see them too often back where I'm from. But these are birds that are pretty common where I am at, somewhat unfortunately. House sparrows and European starlings, 2 non-natives. And speaking of another non-native, the Eurasian collared dove, another species that has become very prevalent throughout most of the US, along with rock pigeons as well. European starlings, house sparrows, collared doves, and rock pigeons are the 4 big non-native bird species that can be found throughout most of the US. But they're not the only non-native species that can be found, just the ones that can be found most extensively, because there's also like these Nande parakeets here, which are very common throughout the St. Petersburg region of Florida, showcased in the last video. And on this trip to Florida, I was able to get lots of good footage of fish crows. Fish crows, as I explained in the first video, look almost identical to American crows, but they're a little bit smaller, typically associated around water, but not necessarily always. And then they have a much more higher pitch, more nasally call, which I got some better footage of this time that you'll hear later in the video. Another repeat from last video, I got a red-bellied woodpecker on a palm tree. A very epic little guy, I love him a lot. Here's the first lifer I got on this trip, my lifer palm warbler. This one's in its non-breeding plumage, which is why it doesn't have the rusty red cap that they normally would have in the breeding plumage. They're also very strange for a warbler in that they like to forage on the ground a lot. They're not very tree-based, which is very interesting. Most warblers aren't like that. Most warblers spend a lot of time in the trees. I also got to see 1 boat-tailed grackle on this trip. This lovely dude right here, you can tell him from a common grackle because he's a bit more slender, got a longer tail, and his eye is dark. Now that's not unique to boat-tailed grackles, that's only in the Florida population. But you know, it's helpful. Here's a sanderling, epic dude walking around on a beach. Don't really have anything else to say here. Couple laughing gulls chilling on a rock. Not too much else to say either, but just it's a nice little shot of these 2. I was also able to get much better footage of magnificent frigate birds this time. These guys are just so cool, man. Me and my friend Gibson, one time we were watching snow geese, we had a joke that they were the PNGs of the sky when they were coasting down to land, because they just like weren't really moving at all. Definitely appropriate there, really appropriate for these guys too. True PNGs of the sky, because they just like, they don't move. Like, I'm kind of almost amazed how they can like shift around when they're soaring so much, because it doesn't even look like they're moving their wings. It's like really crazy to watch. It's almost like hypnotizing. I almost wonder if these guys should have been called kites instead of, you know, the other birds, because I mean, they kind of act a lot like it, dude. It's pretty crazy to watch. One thing that would also be really awesome to see one day with these guys is the males when they're doing their breeding displays, because they inflate these giant gular sacks underneath their throats that just fill with air, and it's such a wacky display, and I'd love to see it one day. Then we got this ruddy turnstone here, being real ruddy and turnstone-y. We also have this brown pelican being brown and pelican-y. And this ring-billed gull being ring-billed and gully. And that concluded the St. Petersburg birding walking trip. The next day, I went to the Skyway Bridge rest area to try to see if I could find one of those American flamingos that had been knocked off course by that hurricane and was still hanging around. Unfortunately, I never saw the flamingo, which was very sad. I did get to see some great egrets though, as well as my lifer lesser black-backed gull, which I only got pictures of, but you know, here he is in all of his lesser black-backed glory. There we go. But after the stop at the Skyway, I went to a place called Robinson Preserve, which is south of Tampa Bay. Pretty cool spot, lots of walking paths and marshy areas to look at stuff around. Didn't get to spend as much time there as I would have wished, but I still got to see lots of cool stuff, including these least sandpipers, which are always cute and adorable to see. You can ID them as least sandpipers by their incredibly small size. They're like the size of sparrows. They also have a slightly darker brown plumage on top, and they have yellow legs, which is helpful to identify them from other small little sandpipers. This guy also has extremely yellow legs, the greater yellow legs. In fact, it's even named after it. Tell it's a greater yellow legs because its bill is quite a good bit longer than its head. And then we have a western sandpiper here. You can see it's a little bit bigger than the least sandpipers, not by much, but a little bit, and it's a little bit paler. You can see it's not quite as dark brown on the back. They look very, very similar to semi-palmated, but based on the time of year that this was, and also the length of the bill, I'm pretty darn sure this one was a western. A little bit bigger, I got to see this roseate spoonbill swooping around in the air. Awesome to see, hadn't seen him since the summer. Not the best views of it, unfortunately, but you know, I mean, at least I got to see one, and I got some more footage of it, which is always cool. I also saw this osprey bringing the stick back to its nest, which is pretty cool, gearing up for the breeding season. Northern mockingbird, who's not mocking anything at the moment, but maybe he will later, I don't know. Western cattle egret is next, which I am saying the western cattle egret instead of the just cattle egret because this species was recently split into the western and the eastern. The eastern inhabits like Southeast Asia and Australasia, whereas the western inhabits the Americas, Europe, Africa, that kind of whole region. This one is trying to eat a grasshopper to some success. Got to see a whole bunch of American white pelicans this time, a bird I missed on my last trip. These guys really like to find like a nice little island in the middle of the water, and they like to all like cluster there in a big squad. Very, very cool birds to see. They're very social and big, and it's just super neat. Got a little bit of footage of a white ibis as he was kind of like walking around doing, you know, ibis things. And I got some footage of these ruddy turnstones with some black-bellied plovers like kind of far off in this little like kind of rocky area. And then I saw my lifer, Caspian tern. There he is. He caught a fish. I didn't get footage of him catching the fish, and then I stopped to take pictures so you don't get to see him eat the fish. But still, that was pretty epic to see. You can ID it as a Caspian tern because its bill is a little bit shorter and a little bit thicker than the similar royal tern. Black-bellied plover here in his non-breeding plumage, hence the lack of a black belly, but they do gain it in the breeding season. Some more plovers, some semi-palmated plovers, running around on this little mudflat here with some species of dowitcher. I'm not entirely too sure which, because they both look almost identical. But semi-palmades are always fun little guys. I mean, just look at them. They're like fun-sized killdeer. Willet doing a nice little stride along this beach. And then I got to see an adult roseate spoonbill. Unfortunately, it was at the very end when everyone was leaving, so I didn't get just to look at it for very long. I basically got to take this footage and I had to go. But still, really cool to see. Beautiful bird. Wish I could have stayed there longer. I love spoonbills so much. They're awesome. After that, I went to this area called War Veterans Memorial Park because a family member had recommended it to me. Didn't see a ton of birds there. Saw some stuff as they flew by, such as this brown pelican here. But I did get to see a yellow-rumped warbler, which is pretty cool. Also got to see a blue-gray gnatcatcher. Didn't get any footage of it though, but it was there, trust me. But then I got my next lifer, a yellow-bellied sapsucker. I've now seen almost all the sapsucker species. I just need the Williams sapsucker now. This one was a juvenile. Would love to see an adult one day, but you know, still, it counts. And then I had one more day that I was able to dedicate the birding while I was down there. I went back to Fort DeSoto State Park, because that was a really good, awesome, productive area last time. And I was like, I really want to go back. Plus, piping plover had been seen there, and I really wanted to see a piping plover. But before we get to that, I saw some more Nande parakeets there, like I did last time. Nande parakeets are really, really cool, but you know, I dedicated a lot to them last time. Don't really have anything else to say, but I guess just here's some footage of them. There was also a huge flock of fish crows there, which I got some noise of, which I will play now in case you want to hear what a fish crow sounds like. So yeah, you can tell it's a little bit more nasally and stuff. And then I got this really cool shot of them gathering on this tree with the Nande parakeets, and then they're just all clustering on, and then eventually they all fly off, and I just thought that was cool looking. Then I also got this quick little shot of this fish crow with some kind of food product. Not too sure what, but he had something. Got to see a couple female cardinals. They're very pretty. I think they're just as pretty as the males in their own way. And then I also got to see some red-breasted merganser swimming around in this little pond lagoon. I don't know. It was like a patch of water by the ocean. I don't know if it was salt, probably it was salt water by how close it was, but they were swimming around in it, which is neat. There were also some white ibis hanging out there. Always cool to see. They're very, very common in Florida. They're kind of everywhere. They're almost like crows a little bit because they're in urban areas a lot of the time as well. They're very neat. Love them. And then, way out in the distance, I saw my lifer reddish egret. Love these guys. Now, in the past, I've talked about some bird names that I don't always think are the best. This is a bird name I think is perfect for this species because first off, as you can see on this one, it is reddish. It is not red on the whole body. The red is not fully red. It's like this, you know, rufous, rusty color, reddish, very nice. And second off, which is why it's also appropriate, 10% of these birds are actually white. They don't even look like this. 10% of them are completely white. Love it. Perfect name. It's like such an interesting name, reddish, that you wouldn't think it'd be that appropriate, but it really is. Like, it's such a perfect name for them, and I love it so much. They're also very fun to watch. They feed on very small, minnowy fish, and unlike most herons, which are, I guess, not necessarily sit and wait per se, but certainly do a lot of like slow movements. These guys are very animate. They're running around, chasing after the fish, flaring their wings out. Very active hunters for a heron. And I enjoyed watching it chase the little fish that were being scared by the mergansers. Very clever little guy by using the mergansers to his strategic advantage. Great egret in a very funny pose, which is why I got some footage of it. I also got some cool footage of the ibis as they were feeding on little little things in the water. I don't know. One of them's a crab. I know one of them grabs a crab at one point. You'll see it grab me to crab. The one that's not fully white is juvenile. They don't start off white and then they molt into their white plumage as they age. But yeah, very cool. Common ground dove. Got some more footage of it. Awesome seeing such a small pigeon. North America doesn't have a lot of pigeons, so it's always cool to see another species. Loggerhead shrike again on a sign. I really like birds on signs. I don't know what it is. I just like the imagery of it. I think it's very neat. And And then I went out to the beach proper to see all of the birds that you would find on a beach, including this royal tern here, which has a longer and narrower bill than the Caspian tern, also a little smaller than the Caspian tern, but a very large tern overall. Like, they're like the size of a laughing gull. They're pretty big. These guys are not very large for a tern. These are Forster's terns. You can tell because they just got like this kind of black smudge. They don't really have much of a cap going on, very short legs. And then sandwich terns as well. Very cool. First footage, I was actually able to get of sandwich terns. You can tell they're sandwich terns because they're not super tiny. They also got that little yellow tip on the end of their bill. A group of laughing gulls here. With a sandwich tern and a Forster's tern inside. You know what? I'll try to let you figure out which tern is which. Put your ID skills to the test. I also got this really neat footage of these laughing gulls sitting there. There's something about just how like desaturated this shot is. I don't know, I think it's got like a cool moody vibe to it. Another willet on the beach for today. Very cool. But I then crested this little dune. I saw some plovers mucking around and I got my binoculars on to see if a piping plover was there, and as you can clearly see, a piping plover was indeed there. I was so excited. Piping plovers I've wanted to see a piping plover for so long. It was awesome to finally see one. Part of the reason why I love them a lot is because of their conservation story in the US. The Great Lakes population is listed as endangered and the Atlantic and Great Plains population is listed as threatened. They have suffered a lot from population declines due to habitat loss of their breeding sites mainly. These guys are beach nesters and lots of people like to hang out on beaches. And so human development has removed a lot of nesting habitat from these guys, as well as people walking on beaches often crush eggs or scare plovers away from their nests and they might not come back, which is why on a lot of beaches you'll find fenced off or roped off areas for nesting plovers. And this isn't just true of piping plovers, it's true for so many beach nesting birds. Humans have made beach nesting a much more risky and vulnerable thing than it was when this behavior evolved. But that said, there is a lot of work in the US right now to help save piping plovers, other plovers, and just shorebirds in general, which is why throughout some of the footage here, I bet you've noticed that some of the plovers have bands on them. That's in part because of the conservation work and the recovery efforts. Those bands there are so that individual birds can be ID'd from a distance, which can help give estimates of population number, how long individuals are living, where individuals are going. All kinds of very valuable conservation information can be transferred through these colored bands, which is why you see them on these birds. And thanks to a lot of these conservation efforts, their populations have become significantly more stable than they were in the past, though they are still certainly on the road to recovery. But hopefully their situation and recovery will continue to improve. Hey guys, this is Editing Eric here, and I actually submitted the banding information of these plovers to Great Lakes Piping Plover Conservation Team to both give them information on where these plovers are at, and also so they could give me some information, a little bit of information on the history of these individual birds here, which I'll now relay to you because I think it's kind of cool. So this little plover right here is a male that nests on North Manitou Island, I think I'm pronouncing that right, in a Sleeping Bear Dunes National Park, Michigan. This little guy actually hatched in Silver Lakes State Park, Michigan in 2019, and he has currently spent all of his winters at Fort Soto. And then this plover here actually's got a pretty cool story to go with it. So this plover was captive reared just in 2023, but the reason why it was captive reared is because its mom mated with a male who already had a mate. So because of that, the mom was left to have to take care of the eggs by herself, and at least in piping plovers, the females are not able to incubate the nest all by themselves, and as a result, she abandoned the nest and the eggs were taken up into captivity to be raised there. So I actually think that's some pretty cool little history that goes along with this plover. And then this plover was released at Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore in Michigan, and has also been wintering down here at Fort DeSoto and Outback Key. And then, though I did see a couple other plovers with bands, unfortunately I was a fool and did not gather enough information on them to accurately ID them to an individual bird. Here's another western sandpiper in the back there. Again, a little bit lighter than the least sandpiper and has black legs instead of colored legs. And then I also saw my lifer red knot here. They're in their non-breeding plumage right now, which is why they're not red, but they are red in the breeding plumage, which is neat. You can ID these as red knot because they're a little bit bigger than the Dunlin, which there's some of them in the foreground right now, as well as the fact that they're a bit stockier looking. They got shorter legs and they got a shorter bill, which they don't stab very deep into the mud. They seem to just kind of like peck really quickly along the surface as their feeding style. Semi-palmated plover, being a cute little guy. Then here's some sanderlings, which were kind of on the edge of that little flock of other shorebirds I was looking at. You can tell these are sanderlings because they're about the same size as the Dunlin, but they're got a much shorter bill and they're very pale. They're a very pale shorebird. And then here is some actually good footage of a black-bellied plover walking around doing some plover things there. And then this is a pretty cool shot of the tide coming in and filling up this little pool area and all the shorebirds running down to, like, you know, collect all the stuff that's going on there. So that's a red knot right there on the right, and then a western sandpiper in front, and then some Dunlin in the back with that black-bellied plover to help point some of them out to you. After that, I was done going through that shorebird flock right there, and I continued along the beach. I saw this cool Wilson's plover hanging out there, but then, as I made my way a little further, as I crested another dune, I saw quite the sight, to say the least. Well, guys, I thought I had seen a lot of sandpipers today, but as it turns out, I was just getting started. There were so many shorebirds here, man. It was awesome, but in kind of an overwhelming way. But I did get to see some snowy plover in the group. Here's a cute little snowy plover. A little bit longer legs than the piping plover, which are also black and also has a little longer bill than the piping plover. And with that, I saw basically every plover species you could see in that area that time of year, except for killdeer, unfortunately. Didn't see a killdeer at Fort Soto, very sad. But I did get to see another marbled godwit. There were a couple of them actually hanging out in the surf, doing their thing. And then, of course, there were a lot of plovers. There were so many plovers here, man. Piping, semi-palmated, and a few snowies out there. Getting to see so many piping plovers is really neat, man, because I didn't see any when I was in Florida before, but this time there were so many. There was like 20 of them there. It was awesome to get to watch them all going around doing their thing. I also finally got footage of a turnstone living up to its name, turning stones. What a concept. Yeah, it was really cool to see and get some footage of. But after searching through all the sandpipers, I continued down the beach a little more, saw a whole bunch of terns resting, mostly royal terns, a couple sandwich terns in there. Saw an American oyster catcher, which was cool, a very neat guy, hanging out, doing things. But then, I also saw another bird that I really, really wanted to see, some black skimmers. Dude, do I love black skimmers. They're so weird. Their lower bill is longer than their top bill, and their bills are so thin so they can cut through the water so easily. And let's not forget their crazy feeding style of just like sticking their lower bill into the water and then just like hoping it runs into something. Insane! Like, what a crazy feeding style. I can't even believe that evolved. The footage isn't the best here, but you can kind of make out their weird bill in some of these shots. Unfortunately, I didn't really get to see them skimming at all. They were just resting on the beach. This is the best footage I could get, closest approximation to one skimming. Hopefully I'll get to see them actually doing their insane feeding style one day. But, you know, this was satisfying enough, and to see so many of them too was very, very neat. But after the skimmers, I proceeded to make my way back. Had some other stuff to do with my family that day. But what a great day birding that was. I got to see so many cool things. And the next day, I went back out to the Skyway Bridge rest area to try to see if I could find the flamingo. This time, didn't see it that time either. Very, very sad. But I did see my lifer black and white warbler. So, you know, that makes it a little better at least. And that's really it for this trip birding in Florida. It was another great trip. Got to see a lot of cool birds, a lot of epic stuff. It's always fun birding in a spot that I don't get to bird in too often because I get to see so many cool things. Hopefully one day I'll be able to get a little further outside of the Tampa Bay area to see some other birds that Florida has to offer. I really want to see Florida scrub jays one day. That'd be really cool. Endemic bird to Florida. And then I'd also love to see like mottled ducks and stuff one day down there. That'd be really, really neat. And then maybe one day I'll actually find a flamingo down there or somewhere else. Who knows? I mean, they turned up in Wisconsin this year. You never know where a flamingo could turn up, as it turns out. But yeah, that's it for this video. I hope that you enjoyed it about as much as the last one. That's kind of my goal, what I hope for. And I hope you have a great rest of your day and look forward to some more birding videos at some point in the future. Goodbye.